here, and I'm going to fill those voids. And it looks like a ungodly mess now. But this hot glue flows. Okay? The hot glue actually flows pretty well. See, can you see what I'm doing? I wasn't really paying attention to whether you could see what I was doing. I apologize if you couldn't. Okay. Okay. I'm going to take the tip. So to do that, I'm going to turn this off because we're not going to use it anymore right now. And can you see what we have there? I'm holding it like this because this it's really hard to see right now because it's still molten, and I don't want to tip it, because if I tip it, what's going to happen is it'll start to flow the wrong way. So I kind of want to keep it like this. I want it to flow down. Now, it does stick to this, but you can get that off. If I needed to rework that, I could. Okay? I could rework it. An additional advantage to this is there's actually some hot glue on the threads and on the nut now, so that'll keep this from spinning off. It gets me a bunch of stuff. Especially important here because there is no sort of locking nut or lock washer or anything like that. Although, because it's plastic, when you tighten it down, it deforms a bit. The plastic will deform a bit, which sort of acts like a lock washer. But this is a belt and suspenders approach. But really why we're doing it is to strain relieve these wires. Now, obviously you can do this technique in anything. You can do it in pedals. You can do it in guitars. There are some, I have a couple of guitars here that I built with a LR Baggs piezo bridge. There's a lot of wiring in there. Okay? We need to get those wires out of the way and keep them from shaking around, so there's some hot glue in there. Okay? Hot glue's great. Love it, love it, love it. Okay. It's probably dry, and it is. It's still a little bit rubbery, but it's dry enough to work with. Again, when you're doing this, you're building a lot of these. We'll do a bunch of these at the same time. Okay, so now we'll start to peel off the tape. Sometimes you have a little bit of hot glue that makes it into the tape. It's not a big deal. Just when the tape doesn't want to really come apart, it's okay. Just yank it off. It's fine. Okay. Okay, one there. Another one. We're actually going to use an awful lot of tape in this box. It just makes everything much easier. So this will eventually come down here. But for now, I want to get it out of the way. We'll just stick it up here somewhere. Next thing we want to do, this is our ground. It's going to go down there. Can you see that? Can you see where it's going? Ground's going down here. Okay. What I'm going to do, again, I'm always cutting these long. One thing you want to check up here is that there's no hot glue that's intruding into the area where you're going to glue things down. Okay, where you're going to screw things down. Just give a quick check. All right, so that's going to go down here. Again, I'm going to a little hard to do and show you what I'm doing, just because things are in the way. But I'm going to cut that a little bit long. I'm going to strip it, probably longer than you might think. Okay? Nice long strip. And then for this, I have, again, these cheapy Pros Kit pliers. This happens to be bent nose. Okay? So I can kind of get underneath and bring things up. I'm going to give a little bend. I'm going to come underneath. I'm going to fish that in. Now, the reason that I hope you can see that, because it's important. The reason that I stripped so much insulation off is I absolutely do not want that insulation to get into the joint. Okay. Okay. Can you see where the insulation ends up there? And you could also see how this is kind of like moving around. So that might give me some trouble when I solder, because it may move somewhere I don't want it to move to. So I'll come in with a little bit of tape, secure it. Come on, refocus. I'll secure it so now it doesn't move. What I'm going to do with that end there, I'm just going to get them. Now, when we solder this, you don't have. I could actually probably just leave it like that. It would be fine. Okay. But when we solder this, we don't really want to. We can, but it's not necessary to fill that hole. Okay. What's necessary is to solder, is to get good contact between the wire and the lug, right? The soldering lug. Okay, so while you could just leave it like that, I'm not going to. What I'm going to do, I'm actually going to wrap it around a bit. I want really good contact, and then if I happen to fill that hole with solder when I'm soldering, well, you know, fine. But that's not a necessary thing to do. What's necessary is the metallurgical bond between the wire and the lug. So I'm just going to get that, and just by hand sometimes, going to wrap it around. Okay? See that? Just a little wrap. Again, you don't have to do it like that. Many ways to do this. You can just make a bend. You can just stick it through the hole and solder it. It really doesn't matter that much. This is how I do it. I feel that this is the best way to do it for reliability and to make it easy to solder, because now the wire is not going to squirm around everywhere. Okay? Now we're going to make our joint. And we're going to make our joint the same way we make all of the other joints. And we're going to try to not use too much excess solder. We don't want excess solder on the joint, because it makes the joint ugly. And it also makes it difficult to inspect. I'm going to show you how we inspect this. Okay, now let's see if you can see what I'm doing. Can you, am I able to, okay, you're going to be able to see what I'm doing. I'm just going to get it from the top. It'll probably flow to the bottom by itself, although I may add just a little bit if I don't think it's flowing well to the bottom by itself. All right. Same as always. Make the solder bridge flow in the solder. All right. And try not to flow in too much. Here's my solder bridge. There's the solder. Okay, we're done. You can see I didn't fill the hole. And one thing that I want you to notice. Let me get up here. Let me see if you can actually see it from where you are. I'm gonna zoom out a bit. I think it'll focus better if we're zoomed out. Okay. Now look in there. God, I hope you can see that. Generally, when you're soldering wires, can you see that? Can you? Do you kind of see how I haven't globbed tons of solder on? In fact, you can still even see the strands. Okay? You can see the strands of the wires there. That's what you want. The only way you're ever going to be able to inspect your joint is if you have not put so much solder that you can't see what's going on. So, you know, there I can tell really clearly that everything's flowed well, everything wetted out properly, the joint looks good. If I had tons and tons of solder on there, I would not be able to tell what the hell I did. Okay? I would just have to depend on the fact that just through experience and maybe a little bit of luck, everything went fine. You want to be able to inspect your joints, okay? So you can add more solder. It's not going to hurt the joint, but it'll make it difficult to inspect the joint, and you're not going to know what the quality of your joint is, okay? This is called soldering for inspectability. You want to solder for inspectability, okay? If you can. Now, I'm not going to say every joint's going to be perfect. Certainly every joint I make isn't absolutely perfect like that. Every joint you make isn't going to be absolutely perfect like that, but that's just something to shoot for. Okay? It's a little something to shoot for. Now, people that are familiar with pedal wiring, I happen to use on this pedal a true bypass wiring. It may look a little bit funny because I've moved around a couple of the connections are, so it might look just a little bit funny. It is standard, absolutely standard, true bypass wiring. I've just moved a couple of things around to make the wiring a little bit neater. Okay, but when you trace it out, you're going to find that it is really true bypass, and there's nothing strange or funny. This particular wiring scheme grounds the input when the effect is bypassed. Okay, that's actually related to resistor R9 that some wise guy is going to claim that I forgot to solder, and we talked about that in an earlier video. That was actually no longer necessary when I started grounding the input to the effect here. I think that's a much better way of doing it. Okay. The first thing we need to do, I need a wire that's going to loop from here to there. Okay, it's going to go through 2 of these lugs, and it's going to go to there. Right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut a piece of wire. I'm going to strip enough that I can do that without the insulation being in there. It can be a little long. I can cut that later. I'm going to just bend it by hand. It's fine. I can kind of see where that needs to be stripped now. I'll strip that. You can tell I'm going to try to do all of my bending and stripping and everything else before I actually ever solder. Because you can see I'm actually moving things around. If these joints were soldered right now, I would be stressing that solder joint. Okay? Because remember, wherever you solder is going to get much harder. You're going to cause, again, a stress riser, and you're going to make a likely point of high stress and of failure. So we're trying to avoid that, and the way we avoid that is once we start to solder, we try to make it so that either the next part that we're soldering to is far away, so that we're confident we're not really going to stress that point, or we try to get everything in place first. Okay? Or we pre-bend everything first, so that we can just kind of stick it in place and solder it. We're going to try to be good to these wires. I'm only going to solder these 2 joints. I'm only going to solder the one in front here and the one over here. I'm going to leave the back one empty without solder, because there's actually another wire that's going to come in there and come to the pot later. Okay. The way I solder these, same exact way. I'm going to come in from the front side, I guess you may want to consider it that, with a little bit of solder to make my solder bridge, and then I'm going to flow the solder in from the back side. Now, technically, the way you should do this, you should get these and bend them around the lugs. Really unnecessary here. Number 1. Number 2, there's some cases where we actually go completely through, where that would not be possible at all. So here we go. Flow through the back. There you go, done. Heat up the front. Flow through the back. Done. Okay. Trim. That's done. Okay. Next, what I need to do, let me get him out of the way. Next, what I need to do, I need to run a couple of my signal wires. Okay, and what I do, I keep a box here. I keep a fully assembled box here, so that just to remind myself, in case I forget what goes where. I generally don't forget what goes where, but you know, some of you might know I'm a new parent of twins, which basically means we really don't sleep anymore here. sometimes my brain's just not quite working right. I need a little bit of help, okay? Sorry, but I do. Alright. This next one. I actually want this to go through that guy and through that guy. That's a little bit different, I think. I haven't really seen anybody quite do it like this. And like I said, this true bypass wiring is going to look just a little bit funny. But it's only because it just happens to fit in my box a little bit better like this, okay? Strip that. Thermal strippers are really awesome. I tell you, really great. Okay, and that's actually going to go right to this leg here. Okay, and it's sort of going to go down and up. I'll show you. So we'll thread it through. Thusly, just grab it, kind of wiggle it through. Yeah, it's okay to have a bare wire like that. Well, why not? You have bare lugs. You know, you're not putting heat shrink on all of the lugs, so why not have a bare wire? It's not a big deal. It's not going to move. It's not going anywhere. It's fine. Okay? Don't stress about it. Now we'll bend it down. Using the side of my finger to make nice radius bends if I can. Okay? I'm going to cut this a little bit beyond where I want it to go. Strip off more than I think I need, because I don't want that insulation anywhere near my joint. Go, nice clean strip. I'll bring it on in. Again, you can see I'm trying to route all of this before I actually solder any part of it, because you can see how much I'm moving it around and wiggling it around. If that were soldered right there, you know, I'm starting to weaken that. Why would I do that? Taking so much time and trouble to not stress any of these wires or any of these joints, and I'm not going to ruin it now for sure. And then I'll just get it and just bend it. Oh, you can do it. You can do it by hand. Do it by hand if you want to. Okay. There we go. All nice. Now I'm just gonna solder it. Here we go. I'm gonna do the furthest one away first. It's just a convenience thing. Okay. You can do whichever one you want. It doesn't really matter. Make my bridge, solder from the back. Make my bridge, solder from the back. Okay. Make my, can you see that? I can't really see it, but I'm gonna make my bridge, a solder from the opposite side, and I'll put a little bit of solder on the back. Okay. Again, the hole's not filled. If I inspect it, yeah, I can still see the strands. You know, that's a pretty good joint. That's a pretty good joint. Okay. Trim that off. Okay. Now I need one that's eventually going to attach to the board. Another red wire, another signal wire. This will be the input to the board. Okay. I'm going to leave it long. I'm going to speed up just a little bit here. Okay. Well, you're going to be able to see what I'm doing, but I do need to speed up a bit. And it's pretty repetitive. You know, there's really nothing fancy going on here. You know, the only thing I'm being careful to do is when I route these, I don't want insulation touching metal. I want that away from the metal. So I'm going to actually bend that out a bit. Just don't want that touching. I'm really persnickety about that. Really persnickety about that. Going to tape that down to keep it out of the way. Now, this is actually going to attach to the board, so we are going to have to solder that afterwards, but we're going to try to be careful not to stress this joint too much when we do it. Okay, nothing's touching, no metal is touching. I'm happy with that. And solder bridge, and solder from the back. Okay. could also tell, also does a couple of things. When you're soldering from the backside, it kind of acts as a little bit of a heat shield to prevent the insulation from melting. If you melt a little bit of insulation, and sometimes I do, especially when a wire is bent, you have a sharp bend in the wire, right? The insulation's trying to spring straight. Yeah, you can bend some or melt some or deform some, you know, unless it's near somewhere that it can short out. And really it shouldn't, because these wires shouldn't be moving around, and they shouldn't be routed such that they can easily short out anyhow. You can safely ignore that. It's not that big of a deal. It's strictly a cosmetic issue. The other thing you can do is, as the wire is melting a little bit, when the insulation's melting a little bit, you can kind of, like, if that had started to maybe melt a little bit or soften a little bit as I soldered, what I would do is, when I was done soldering, I would just come in with my finger while it was still sort of soft, and I would just kind of tap it back down, and it'll cool down like that, and nobody will ever know. But it's not that big of a deal. It's just not that big of a deal. Okay. Now, this battery thingy will come here. That'll go on top of these wires. So I'm going to make a little bend here. See what I'm trying to do. I want this to kind of bend up. A little bend just like that, because I want this to travel between my mounting locations there, okay? See, so I have one wire coming on that side, I have another wire coming between these two, that's power, and then I have my other power wire coming between these two. And I'm going to check that when I put in the board. We're going to make sure, I'm going to look very carefully to make sure that nothing's pinched. You don't want to pinch wires, of course. Okay? But having them routed ahead of time instead of trying to do it all at the end makes it much, much easier. Alright? Okay, very good. Let's see, what else do we have to do? I need a wire that goes from here, this is my output, to there. Let's see. Need something to go from here to there. It's going to go from here to there. Okay? What I'm going to do for this, again, just cut it long. Let's see if I can get you a better view. What I want is, I want the wire to kind of come down and make a little L. Okay? Make a little L to go there. I'm going to get these wonderful round nose pliers, right? And make a nice sharp L. Okay? Sharp but radiused. Sharp but radiused. I'm kind of going to look and see how it fits. And I'm going to take sort of a guesstimate of how much I need to strip off. And I'll strip that much off. Plus a little bit more, because I don't want the insulation in that joint. Okay? Just like that. That's actually, let's see if I can get you maybe a better view. Not a better view. I'll try to do it like this. You can see that's a little bit long. Okay? And just snip off the end. Ta-da! Then I can come in from the bottom. And just kind of do that. And now I want a way to keep that put. And if I let go, well, I'm looking out here. It's kind of staying put. But normally it would just fall over. Oh, it's staying put because the wire was keeping it put. So what I'm going to do again is I will, this light is really bad. I'll get it in there. I'll come around with some tape. Okay. And just tape it on there. Obviously this is much easier when you don't have to worry about showing the camera what it is you're doing. Okay? And just tape it on. Just tape it around here. You know, you can put the tape on whatever you want. Tape's great. Then I'll do the same thing. I'll get the little end there. I'll bend it over. It doesn't have to be overly long. If it is a little bit long, it's fine. It's not a big deal. But that's all you really need. That's all you need. Okay, and then we'll come in. You see that, I hope? Maybe it's better like that. Ooh, it's really dark in here now. Come in and make the bridge from one side, flow from the other side, okay? And again, I can see still the individual strands. That's a really great joint, okay? Now this needs to come to that middle lug there. So I will snip it. I will strip it. Hey, that rhymes. Snip it and strip it. Okay. I could have done this before. I probably should have before I actually soldered the other part. I didn't remember to do it, but that's okay. You can see what I did is I was holding it here with my finger to make sure that stress did not get to that part there. Okay. So you improvise sometimes. I'm not going to redo a joint just because of that. All right. A little leftover piece of insulation there. I'm just going to pull that off and get insulation into the joint. And again, I will just come in from the back. Glue and solder. That's good. Okay. Zoom out a bit. So pretty much we are ready, I believe, to install the board. There's some other things here which are not wired in yet, but they are going to go directly to the board, and I prefer to wire some of that after the board's in place, or else we have a bunch of wires that are hanging out and making a mess. I'm going to tuck that out of the way for now. I'm going to take the board, okay, test the fit. Fits good, everything's good, I like it. This wire has to come to that little jumper there. We're actually going to do it from the back. I'll bring him up to the jumper, sort of guesstimate. It's not really that critical, this is just power. Guesstimate about how much I need. You really don't want too much here, because if you have too much, you're going to have trouble routing it underneath the board. Oops, that's kind of hot. To strip off a good amount. Remember, stripping off a little bit too much is usually not a problem. Stripping off not enough is usually a problem. Okay. Put that in and bend it over, and now this is going to fit like this. I kind of want that to get tucked out of the way. Okay, because if you don't do that, then it's sort of going to be pushing down and up on it all the time. If it's tucked out of the way, it'll just get pushed up once and stay. If it's putting pressure on it, that's not good. Okay, I'm going to look to make sure that we are actually good. I'm going to look to make sure nothing's pinched. I can tell, I can move things around. Nothing's pinched. I can look and see that nothing's pinched as well. Okay, I'm going to make sure that this does not intrude into that joint. Okay. And I'm actually going to solder it in this position here so that I can see the back. Now, I'm not going to be able to do that on every joint. I'll admit that. I'm going to have to go with my gut on some of these. On the ones that I can see the back, I can see that it's flowed through to the back, so I made a really good joint. And now I will carefully insert the board. And now it is time to actually install the board. And that's it. The board is in there for good now. In there forever, I hope. Okay.